Welcome to the Mechanical PE Exam Prep Podcast, the podcast where I give mechanical engineers like you the tools and motivation to get your professional engineering license and take your career to the next level. In today's episode, we're going to talk about some study advice that goes beyond the books. We're going to talk about fueling your brain and body for the PE exam. And specifically, we're going to focus on three key areas, which are sleep, nutrition, and fitness. Now, when we talk about these topics, a lot of times I'm hesitant to share what it is I want candidates to really be thinking about because it can sound a bit preachy. And if you're in the process right now of starting to go for your PE and thinking about the studying that you're going to have to do and how much work it's going to be and how you're going to figure out how to organize your time, then you're probably already feeling a little bit overwhelmed. And the worst thing that could possibly happen is that you fail to get started because of that overwhelm. So I just want to say right here at the outset that the goal of this episode is not to add more tasks onto an already potentially overwhelming situation. Quite the opposite. I want to offer you some tactics that if you implement them toward the beginning of your study process, they're going to make things easier in the long run because you're going to be at this for a while. This is a process that's going to take 3 to 6 months probably, in some cases a little longer, in a few rare cases maybe shorter, but typically we're looking at a 3 to 6 month window, which is a substantial amount of time, and it's going to take some endurance. So that's why I want you to focus on taking excellent care of yourself, and that's really where these ideas are coming from. If some of the things I share here don't make sense for you, then feel free to take what works and just leave out the rest. Because again, each of the changes that we're going to discuss here would be challenging in and of themselves. So making multiple lifestyle changes at the same time and starting studying could really be doubly overwhelming. So I understand that. And when you implement these strategies, if you choose to implement any of these strategies, I want you to give yourself tons of grace. And if despite everything I say here, you end up staying up too late, eating pizza and candy bars, hitting snooze instead of going for a run, then just rest assured that this stuff is not life and death. And anything you can do that moves you in a positive direction, that starts to create that positive feedback loop, is going to be helpful. So do what you can and don't worry about being perfect. And before we get into the specific tips, we should acknowledge the most important point, which is that any successful study plan should incorporate the use of technical resources that are organized and put into a sensible order and that are consumed and used thoughtfully in order to gain the necessary knowledge and skills that are required for the PE exam. We have a program for that. If you're interested, you can reach out with any questions. But the purpose of this episode is to talk about some of the additional considerations outside of actually studying and how you may want to think about going through an inventory of some of these key lifestyle elements that may set you up for success over the course of the next few months. And the reason we're doing this is because studying is, by definition, a cognitive process, and the quality of our thinking depends on having enough energy and mental clarity to do the work day after day. So I am a firm believer that cultivating this state of readiness is a meta skill. And by meta skill, I mean it's a skill that allows us to build other skills. Specifically, in this case, all of this self-care that we're discussing is what sets up the possibility of building new skills. And it rests on these three pillars: sleep, nutrition, and fitness. So in this podcast, this is far from comprehensive. This is a very brief episode, but I want to keep this short so that it just gives you a little spark of inspiration, because a lot of what I'm going to tell you are things you already know. I just want to give you a nudge in the right direction and encourage you in the knowledge that this stuff does make a difference. We're just going to cover a few quick practical tips that I believe can help candidates like you that are pursuing PE licensure. And I think what you'll notice is that there's actually an outsized benefit for each additional tactic that you're able to put into practice because of synergy. So it's great if you can improve your sleep habits in and of itself, but if you can also improve your sleep and eat a little better, or improve your sleep and improve your eating and get some movement into your daily life, the more of these things that you're able to do, the whole will be greater than the sum of the individual parts. And if you're already pretty good in one or two of these areas, then the other thing that I wanted to mention from the outset is that there's more opportunity to be gained if you have significant sticking points in one area. So if you know that you're good in one or two of these areas already, and you can focus on cleaning up the weak spots, that's going to have the most bang for your buck. We don't want to focus on fine-tuning until we've done the course adjustments in all three areas. Or just for a quick example, there's not much value in eating your vegetables if you're trying to get by on 4 hours sleep, right? So without further delay, I'm going to get into the specific tips, and I've got 2 tips for each of the 3 areas. So we'll do 2 tips on sleep, 2 on nutrition, and 2 on fitness. And if you like these, you think these are helpful, I'd love to hear your feedback after the episode, so feel free to send me an email or reach out. If any of this is useful and you're putting it into practice, then I'm excited to hear what difference it can make for you. So the first tip around sleep is to establish a standard bedtime. Super boring advice here, right? The most common advice around sleep is to get 8 hours of sleep per night. I think we all know this. But the devil's actually in the details on this one, because most people work a 9 to 5 schedule or something similar. Maybe you start a little bit earlier, but it's a regular routine Monday through Friday, typically. And that means that the start of your day is constrained. You can get up earlier, but you can't get up any later. You need some minimum amount of time in the morning. And depending on if you like to do anything before work, whether it's exercise or you have family obligations, there's a certain start time that isn't movable. So it doesn't take an engineer like us to work backwards and do the subtraction and figure out if we're going to get 8 hours of sleep, then we can find out what our ideal bedtime is just by that simple subtraction. And as simple as that sounds, a lot of us don't actually stick to a standard bedtime because we probably feel like we have a lot of things that we have to do. Maybe we're wound up at night, or maybe you've been going all day and you finally have an opportunity to relax at night. So you're not exactly eager to end the day because that's a little bit of time that you get for yourself. So it definitely is a compromise, but studying for the PE is something that's going to involve sacrifice, and I think all 6 of these tips are going to reflect that. So what I'm suggesting to consider here is to choose a standard time to turn in that allows you to get that 8 hours, and then set an alarm if you have to, a time to go to bed. I did this myself when I was trying to teach myself to be able to get up earlier. I did the subtraction and I was like, well, I've got to go to bed at 9 o'clock if there's any way I'm going to be able to get up at 5. And I don't always get up at 5 now, but that's the kind of thinking that's required. And once you do this for a couple weeks and you get into that routine, it'll get easier. But initially, for that first week or two, it does take a special effort to remind yourself to go to bed at a set time. The second tip around sleep is to get up around the same time every day, including weekends. And this follows naturally from the previous suggestion. We're setting a bedtime, we're setting a wake-up time. We're just trying to regulate our system so that our body isn't getting surprised. And this one was tough for me personally. My whole life through college and even a few years into my career, I always slept in on Saturday and Sunday. You know, there were things going on at night on the weekends that I wanted to enjoy. And then on Monday morning, you have to switch back to getting up early for work. And when you do this for years, it's like having jet lag twice a week, every week. And eventually it just gets old. And it leads to the same set of symptoms that you would have with jet lag: fatigue, malaise, difficulty concentrating. I think we've all experienced that as a result of being tired. And once you get into a habit of doing that, then Monday mornings tend to just feel a certain way. It's not just a function of the fact that there's a whole work week ahead. It's also our sleep schedules readjusting, and it really has an impact. So what I'm suggesting here is to try a consistent waking time. Do this for a couple weeks. If you like it, you might never go back. And at first, when you're setting an alarm to go to bed and doing this consistent wake-up time every day and trying to get into a rhythm, you might not get it exactly right. So obviously you can tweak it and calibrate and try to figure out how to dial it in so it's working just the way you want it to. And if it doesn't work for you, if it gives you more time and you can tell that it's better, but for whatever reason you just don't like it, then one thing you might consider is just doing this for a few months while you're studying for the PE exam, because it is going to help with your studying. I'm sure of that. But if it doesn't necessarily fit your overall lifestyle and how you want to live long term, then it doesn't have to be a permanent change. But you can do this for 3 to 6 months, knock out the PE exam, and then go back to a sleep schedule that's a little bit more relaxed after that. The next tip is around nutrition. This one might be a little bit controversial, but it's something that helped me, so I wanted to share it with you guys, and I'm really curious to hear if it can help you too. And the idea is to eat half as many carbohydrates. So the standard American diet includes 300 grams of carbohydrate per day. That's quite a bit. And we've actually known for years that the food pyramid is flawed, yet somehow this information seems to not propagate back into the mainstream guidance. So we're all just kind of eating a significant amount of carbohydrates every day forever. And I'm not necessarily saying that folks are choosing the wrong foods and they're eating things that are high in sugar, necessarily eating junk food, some of the obvious stuff there. You could be eating healthy grains, right? It's not necessarily that bread and pasta and rice and potatoes are bad for you per se. That's not my claim here. I'm just saying that the total quantity of starches that we're eating that ultimately accumulates about 300 grams per day for a typical person is higher than it needs to be. So my suggestion here is to eat half as much. I'm not suggesting that everyone should go on a ketogenic diet and eat 50 grams of carbs a day. That's going to dramatically change the way your body works. And it's interesting to look into, but I definitely would not recommend that kind of a change on a permanent basis. I've tried it just as an experiment. I did it for 6 weeks, and it's doable, but it's different. It's not something I wanted to do long term. But I do recommend this kind of lower carb eating on a continuous basis, where we kind of drop from 300 grams to maybe 100 to 150 grams per day. And that's a significant adjustment. If you're happy with the weight range that you're in and you're not looking to make any changes there, then 150 is perfectly fine. So literally just cut it down by half. If you do want to drop a little bit of weight, then going a little bit lower to maybe 100, 125 range would be helpful in that regard. But that's not the goal here. The goal is just to eliminate enough of the starches and definitely eliminate all the empty calories from sugar, added sugar, and soda, Gatorade, anything like that. That's got to go, because that's going to take your energy spiking and crashing all the time. But we'll keep all the incidental carbohydrates that come from things like whole fruits and vegetables, because we're not going to eliminate all the nutrients and vitamins that are in those foods. We want all of that. And then we just control the pure starches, like I mentioned before, the bread, pasta, rice, and potatoes, to make up the difference to get us the rest of the way up to, let's say, 150 grams. And then you're going to have a shortfall calorically if you eliminate half of your carbohydrates. So where is that coming from? We've got to top up with a little bit more protein and healthy fat. And ultimately, the outcome of all this is that it's going to stabilize your energy throughout the day and get rid of that crashing and brain fog. I know for me, I didn't pay any attention to this when I was in my 20s, and I would eat big lunches, big dinners, and lots of pasta and rice and grains. And again, not unhealthy food, but large quantities of it. And after a while, you start to notice that you're crashing as a result of these meals at the same time every day. And it takes some amount of time to come out of that. And there's just no need to live like that. You can regulate and stabilize that by just choosing different foods and eating them in the right quantities. And then you can have energy throughout the day that's like a DC battery. It's just constant. And it's not up and down all over the place. It's really going to help allow for that clear thinking, which is a hard requirement for studying. And the next tip that I wanted to offer around food is to shop the perimeter of the grocery store. Now, you may be thinking, grocery shopping, I don't even want to get involved. It would be completely understandable to me if you wanted to delegate as much of the food preparation as possible when you're focusing on the PE exam and you're adding that to your already busy schedule. But for many of us, the challenge arises if there's no one else that's there that's going to do the work to provide you with nutritious, delicious meals that are going to fuel you day after day. So if you have a short list of restaurants or takeout spots in your area that can meet this need, that's perfect. That could be a strong alternative if you don't mind going that route. But if the food options in your area are scarce, or they're not that healthy, or there's not enough variety, or it's cost prohibitive, then you're running out of good options here. So procuring your own groceries and preparing your own meals is probably going to be the last good option. So this tip is when you walk into the grocery store, you may notice, and you can picture your actual grocery store as you do this exercise, most of the things that can be actually classified as food are located at the perimeter of the store. So produce, meat, eggs, dairy, right? Think about it. All those things are at the edges. There's a handful of exceptions, but your best bet when you're shopping is to just do a lap around the outside and grab everything you need. Because what's inside are the manufactured products, right, in the interior of the grocery store, which tend to be packed with added sugar and industrial seed oils, which are questionable in the impact that those can have on our health. There's been some research recently that suggested that some of these seed oils can be harmful for our brains. I don't know how true that is, but it's enough to make me nervous. So stick to the perimeter, grab the healthy stuff. Those are the ingredients you're going to focus on when cooking. And this is definitely an area where you could spend a lot of time, and this could be a huge detour and distraction from the PE exam. That is not my goal for you. You don't have to become an expert chef. For me personally, I learned to make the same 2 or 3 meals over and over again on a rotation. But I did that resting in the confidence that I knew I was giving my body something helpful rather than harmful. Now, you might argue that the lack of variety of making the same things is less than ideal, and there's probably some truth to that. But the goal here, my goal at that time and my goal for you, is to be able to eat well enough and also to be efficient with your time in the kitchen so you're not taking yourself away from studying. And another tip that's related to that is to make double or triple so that you have extra for leftovers, and that can make you a lot more efficient so that you're ready and able to show up for your study sessions the way you need to so that it can really be effective. And the last area is fitness, and I've got 2 tips for fitness as well. The first one is to raise your heart rate to the maximum aerobic function, and I'll explain what that is, for 30 minutes, 3 times a week. So maximum aerobic function, sometimes called your MAF heart rate, can be calculated by subtracting your age from 180. So at the time of this podcast, I'm 37. So if I subtract 180 minus 37, that's 143. So that's my MAF heart rate. That's my maximum aerobic function heart rate. So the goal is to exercise in any manner you like. You can walk, run, bike, row, jump rope, whatever you like to do, whatever you find enjoyable, whatever form of exercise you're actually going to do because you like it, to increase your heart rate in the direction of that number. Now, you might be saying, 143 beats a minute, that's a lot. Or if you're younger than me, then it's going to be even higher. So that sounds kind of intense, right? But actually, it's counterintuitive. For most people, with the exception of highly conditioned athletes, the perceived effort level associated with your MAF heart rate is actually low. So if I get my heart rate up to 143, it doesn't feel hard. It actually feels easy. It feels like I kind of want to go a little bit harder. And this is not unusual. This will probably be the case for you as well. So the challenge is actually to prevent yourself from exceeding the target. You're going to want to go harder, and your heart rate is going to easily go over that number, and you have to slow down to keep it below that number. So how do you do that? How do you actually manage that? Well, there's a couple ways. One is you can wear a heart rate monitor, which is not as big a deal as it sounds like. They're pretty inexpensive and easy to use. It's just a strap around your chest, and you throw on a watch, and you're able to monitor it while you're running or cycling or whatever you're doing. If I go running, there's a heart rate monitor on my chest. It's been that way for years. It's not really a big deal, and keep you in check. You can even set an alarm on some of them so it'll buzz if you go too hard and keep you below that level. Or another easier, low-tech, and perfectly acceptable way to accomplish the same thing is to train with a partner and make sure that you're always able to carry on a conversation. This is called the talk test. So if we're exercising at a level that we're above our ventilatory threshold, it's difficult to talk. So if I'm like riding my bike by myself and I don't have a partner with me, if my heart rate monitor is not on for whatever reason, then I just imagine myself trying to have a conversation at that level. And if I can't do it, if I can't sing a few lines of a song while riding my bike, then I'm going a little bit too hard. And you got to step off the gas and get down back below your MAF heart rate. So why is this important? Why do we want to stay below a certain level? Wouldn't it always be better to go harder in terms of exercise? Actually, no. The goal here is to train our cardiovascular system to burn fat. As soon as we pick up the pace, as soon as you take your heart rate over that MAF heart rate limit, your system, your metabolic system in your body actually switches from burning fat to burning glucose instead, which has the same effect as eating lots of carbs. When we finish the workout, all we want to do is eat a sandwich and take a nap. And you're again into this energy roller coaster where you're feeling energized and then we crash. So what we want to do instead is train our bodies to run on fat. And also, if we follow the nutritional tip from earlier, we're probably eating a little bit more healthy fat since we're reducing some of the carbs. So there's a big synergy between this one and the reduction of carbs discussed previously. And when we do this, when we train our bodies to run on fat, we stabilize our energy, not just when we're exercising, but also when we're not exercising. And that's the benefit we're looking for. There's a lot of benefits to cardio exercise in general. It balances our neurotransmitters, it increases blood flow to the brain, and it produces that mental sharpness that we're looking for. I read about this in a book over the summer last year called Spark, the Revolutionary New Science of Exercise in the Brain. It's really quite compelling what a difference exercise can make for the long-term health of our brain, but also just our ability to think and remember and have that feeling of mental clarity day in and day out. So hopefully that's not too big of an ask in terms of fitness. We're looking for half an hour a few times a week, and we don't have to go that hard. So my hope is that hearing this is actually relief. And if you've been kicking yourself like, oh, I really need to get out there and I need to go hard and I got to do these long workouts or I got to make them super intense, otherwise there's no point. Actually, quite the opposite. Some light jogging or easy spinning a few times a week can make a big difference. And the last tip that I have around fitness is to lift or carry something heavy a couple times per week. And the reason I wrote it that way is because I don't want you to feel like weightlifting has to be some formal, structured, time-consuming activity. I think a lot of us have this vision of going to the gym and you're going to be there for an hour, you're going to do certain exercises, you're going to leave exhausted. If you enjoy weightlifting and you've been doing it for a long time and that's your thing, more power to you. But for those of us who don't do that regularly or just aren't drawn to the idea of being in the gym and doing structured workouts, a couple of sets of pull-ups and push-ups twice a week. Like I hung a pull-up bar in my basement so I can just do 10 reps on my way up or down the stairs. Like it doesn't have to be, you barely sweat, right? Like it's this concept of slow weights where you do a little 20 push-ups here, 10 pull-ups there, and cumulatively over the course of a day or a week, you actually do a fair amount of heavy lifting, but it doesn't necessarily have to be one discrete effort. So like I said, it could be push-ups, pull-ups, squats, lunges. You can do it with dumbbells if you have them, or just some heavy objects, or just your body weight, depending on your level of fitness. That might be enough. I know for me, like I don't need a barbell to do squats. If I can just do a few body weight squats, that's going to be a big benefit to me. Another thing that's interesting is you can put 20 pounds of books in a backpack and just go for a walk for 45 minutes. There's a whole community of people around this activity. They call it rucking. You may have heard of it. And they use bricks or special weights or weighted vests. But for me, I'm only going for about 20 pounds. So if I just take some old textbooks and throw them in a backpack and go for a walk, that's fine. I don't know, if you have things around the house to do, depending on your living situation, you can rake some leaves, chop some wood. There's any number of things if you just look around at what's going on. Maybe your grocery store is half a mile away, and instead of driving, you could walk there instead and carry the bags back. So be creative, find things that fit into your lifestyle. Don't necessarily feel like you have to add separate additional effort to get these things done. Try to fit them into your life the way it's already set up. Anything that involves your muscles will work. And for our purposes here, the goal is not to necessarily increase strength, although that's a pleasant side effect. Specifically, what we're seeking here is the chemical and hormonal release that accompanies the strength adaptation when we do heavy work. That's what improves the cognitive performance in ways that are complementary to the cardio training. So if you're doing And again, it comes back to synergy, right? If we are doing some of the cardio that we discussed in the last point, and now we add in a little bit of this strength, and like I said, a little bit goes a long way, then it can make a tremendous difference. Now, if you want to run sprints and max out your bench press and do all these intense things, that's fine. But I just want you to know that the most intense forms of exercise are not a requirement to achieving the improved thinking, reasoning, and remembering that make for high quality studying. So keep it easy. It's more important to get the reps in and do it a few times a week than it is to make it super hard where it starts to feel like a burden or an obligation just to get out of the gate, just to put your shoes on and go do it. So the bottom line, sleep, nutrition, and exercise are cornerstones not only to health and longevity, but also of optimal cognition. These are crucial to the foundation of studying. And I want to reiterate a little bit about what I mentioned at the beginning. Don't feel like you have to be perfect. If before listening to this podcast, your sleep was erratic, your diet was bad, your exercise was non-existent, don't be discouraged. The main point here is for you to take inventory and find opportunities for gradual improvements that can be sustained. Can you get a little bit better in one or two or all three of these areas and start to create that positive feedback loop for yourself across all three domains? It's something that can have a long-term benefit beyond the PE exam and spread into other areas of your life. And the potential benefits are even greater to you if you can find meaningful upgrades in all three areas because of the synergy between them. And I know that any improvements that you're able to make are going to powerfully set the stage for an enriching and enjoyable study experience. So I hope you're feeling inspired. I know I am. I'm going to go out for a bike ride after recording this. And until next time, happy studying. Thanks for listening to the Mechanical PE Exam Prep Podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving a review to help other engineers find the podcast. And if you're looking for a program that will help you pass the PE exam, check out the full access bundle available at mechanicalpeexamprep.com and feel free to reach out with any questions. I would be honored to be your guide on the journey to becoming a professional engineer.